And it's my pleasure to welcome to the Today's Leader podcast, Building Tomorrow's Best Leaders Today. Please welcome Lisa Maries Platske. How are you, Lisa Marie?
I am wonderful, and it is a pleasure to be here with you, Coach Curl. Thanks so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. What part of the world are you from?
Right now, I am in Richmond, Kentucky,
Okay.
United States.
I've had a phenomenal journey around the world in the last couple of days. I've spoken with people in Ireland, I've spoken with people in Canada, I've spoken with people in the United States. So it's just, I love what I do, and I love speaking with leaders right around the world. So let's get the story started. Lisa Marie, please share your story with my listeners.
My story. What I love about that is that story is what makes us each so unique. And my leadership journey is a journey that started in federal law enforcement in the United States. So a little bit of a different place. And growing up, I had these visions that I was going to be one of Charlie's Angels. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that show, but I thought for sure that I was going to have that was going to be my journey, or perhaps I was going to be, like a Wonder Woman. That was my vision, my idea, my thought. And going into law enforcement, it wasn't really quite like that at all, like they portrayed on TV. And I didn't realize how much I didn't know about myself, or how much I didn't know about leadership. I suppose when you're in your 20s, you think that you have far more answers than you do. And I learned that I had very, very few answers, and it was a wonderful journey in human behavior and leadership.
It's always such a big realization when we realize that we don't know it all, or that we don't know everything, or what we know is minuscule based around what we're actually experiencing, isn't it?
Exactly. I find the older I get, the more questions I have and the less answers I have.
Yeah, and we're certainly seeing that right around the world over the last couple of years. There's probably far too many questions that are still left unanswered, but we won't dive into that rabbit hole. So as I mentioned off air that your name came up to me in an interview that I had with Anne-Marie Schroeder. And when I talked about people that inspired her on her journey, and your name came up as her coach and as a real major influence. So share with me what you actually do and how you work with clients. What would you pinpoint as your specialty?
My area of expertise is in leadership, specifically around the beingness of leadership. So oftentimes leadership is spoken about as something that you do. You lead people, and you lead them in this manner and with this system or this methodology. And on my journey, I've discovered for me that leadership is something that starts internally first. And you can certainly understand that based on your expertise, Coach Curl, that we so often there's the idea with leadership around titles and around position or structure, and leadership is something that starts inside. And when I started off my leadership development company and received accolades and awards for it, it came from a place of being someone who, once again, back to those questions and answers, thinking that I understood leadership in terms of what someone should do to lead others. And over time, on my own journey and what I now teach today in my 7 pillars of leadership, and I've had the honor of coaching over 100,000 leaders throughout the world, training or mentoring them, it's been that this beingness of leadership, who you're being, matters far more than what you're doing and what you're saying. It certainly informs it, and it's not that it's not important. It's just that's the crux of the work that I'm interested in having people get to. Because for me, then you can have health, then you can have happiness, then you can have success, then you can have meaning in however you define it, whatever that looks like for you.
So beingness, and in all honesty, I've never heard that word before. So help me understand what that looks like or what that means to a specific leader.
Sure. So beingness is that I am so crystal clear on what my code of ethics are. I'm so crystal clear on what my mission, purpose, and calling are. I'm so crystal clear on what my values are in my organization and in how I run my life. And I'm so crystal clear on the vision of where it is that I'm going. That doesn't mean that that doesn't change or evolve. The vision changes and evolves. The ethics, the values, the mission remain the same. And they're my rod of alignment, so that I understand that when I'm someplace, whether it's working in an organization, whether I have a business and I'm working with a client, whether I'm someone who's in a relationship externally, I'm really clear this is either for me or it's not for me right now. And I find that a lot of times when we're in the journey of the doingness of leadership, it's about getting people to follow me. If I behave in this manner, then people will follow me. Then people will get behind me. Then people will do what I want them to do. Then people will buy into the vision. And that ends up being an awful lot of work. If you're trying to drag someone to something, you drag them through it, and it's exhausting. And when you're in the place of the beingness, there's the who you're being matters. You individually get to choose.
How does a leader get into that space? Because I mean, as we move through the corporate ranks or the government ranks, or wherever we're building our leadership legacy, it is all about doing, behaving, and results, I guess, in so many spaces. And I've got no doubt that you would have been confronted by leaders who sort of look at the being concept as, that's not going to put the money on the bottom line scenario. So how does a leader take that journey so that they are what I would call sort of at one with what they do and how they act and who they are?
Well, I would say that it involves a whole heck of a lot of courage. That's a big piece. You have to be willing to be in that, and that's why I celebrate my clients, because the client that goes on that journey, that is not the easy journey, because you're going to say no. You are going to buck the system. You are going to say things that may be contrary to what is typically expected. For me, this is not in exchange for results. And I look at it as that's often what people see for themselves when they're trying to wrap their head around it. Like, don't I have to exchange money for meaning? Don't I have to trade in a piece of my soul in order for me to climb the ranks? Don't I have to give something up in order to have the success that I want? And that is so hardwired into the journey of leadership for, I'd say, the majority of people. And for me, I just found myself in a place where I was not authentically living my own life. It was that of so many other people that I could not. It literally, what I've learned is when people are in that place, they do one of three things. They either act out, burn out, or get sick. One of those three: act out, burn out, or get sick. And you see it in workplaces because there's some sort of resonance that's off. So when you ask about how does somebody do it, they've got to be courageous and be willing. And it's a starting from the inside. It's being able to write down and say, here's what it is that I stand for. I'm someone who stands for honesty, not because honesty is a good thing to stand for, but because I'm telling my subconscious mind that that's who I am. And so by me putting that in my code of ethics, I'm not doing it for somebody else. I'm doing it for me. And I'm not, and when I say that every interaction that I have, is part of my code of ethics, is that people leave better when they're around me and never worse, because I'm not going to create any harm in the world by me doing that and honoring that. It means that when there's a deal or an opportunity or a conversation or something that happens at work, I'm willing to say, isn't there potentially a third option? Because what you're telling me to do goes against how I'm hardwired, and it doesn't make sense. And I found that for myself, even when we were in situations where we were handcuffing someone, taking something away, you could still do it in a way that was honoring and with dignity of the person. But that meant that somebody had to create a different path and do things differently than they perhaps had been done in the past.
Yeah.
And that takes courage. And so I'm not interested in doing it at the expense of results. I believe, organizational bottom line, and whether that's fiduciary or whether that's emotional, it's still, there's a responsibility that you have as a leader. That's not what this is about. This is about people who are in positions that literally are trading in parts of their life for a someday or the financial payoff.
It's one of the things that I really noticed on your profile on your webpage is that Charlie's Angels moment when you took on the first sort of role, and you picked up the nickname of Hair and Nails. And I thought that was really quite compelling, because most of the people that we go to work with initially, they always want to tag the newcomer in whichever way, shape or form. But what I noticed and what stood out to me is that in this statement, it says, I also recognise that being my speak when spoken to self was not going to enable me to excel in this area. And when I read that, I'm sort of sitting back and I'm thinking and the courage to sort of shift, to me, that innate or built conditioning that we have, that we operate in a certain way. And many leaders do that. We operate in the way of the guys that we see around us, that we've been trained, that we've been mentored in, and them being challenged to be, okay, now I want you to be authentic, or now I want you to create your values or your code of ethics. What's the journey there for a leader? How do you get that realization happening for them that there could be a better way?
I would say that the majority of the people who come to me, Coach Curl, they don't come to me from a place of starting at the beginning of their journey. They've already experienced some sort of success. They've already have accomplishments, and what they're going is, I have all of these things and there's still something missing. And I can't figure out what the heck it is, because I've got all these things that people say I should be successful. I should, I should be happy in this place, and I'm not. And so what is it? And it's because if you trade and chip away little pieces of who you are over and over again in exchange for whatever it is, a paycheck, an accolade, or whatever, it still leaves you empty. You won't end up fulfilled. And so I learned early on for myself in my career that I just wasn't willing to do that. And being really clear about what mattered most to me didn't leave me unable to answer questions that I find so many people have a difficult answering. And that is, who are you? What do you want? And why does that matter? You get to decide. And a lot of times people will go, well, I guess the next thing would be the next level of promotion. I guess the next thing would be the next bigger house. I guess the next thing would be, I'm supposed to have this car. And so I find I'll talk to people and I'll say, why did you make that investment? It doesn't make any sense to me. And they'll go, well, I guess if I want to increase my portfolio, that would be the next investment. It's not based on who they are or what they want.
It's what we believe that we want, or that we believe. It's that whole concept that we're acting in a way that we believe the world expects us to behave.
Exactly. Exactly. Like, you must want that. That would be foolish to not want that. I mean,
Of course I want a new car. Of course I want the latest thing, because that's an indicator of success as well. Whereas potentially what the indicator for success for all of us should be is how we feel inside.
right.
Is that simplifying it too much?
No, not at all. Not at all. I don't believe that. I don't think there's anything, it might be simple, but it isn't easy. So,
We know that. We know that. So one of the things that I know with leaders is a lot of the leadership experience that people are in, or is highly dependent on the quality of the person that they report to. So their direct boss or their direct report, the person they report to, has such a responsibility and in many ways they don't see the responsibility of the development, the mentoring, and ultimately the performance of that particular leader. They can either make the place a really great place to work that people enjoy coming to, they're being stretched, challenged, developed, or they can make it something that's akin to a nightmare. So what are some of the things that you can do as a leader if you're in that position where maybe your direct report, the person that you're reporting to, may not be the best person for you? So have you seen that in your experience?
yes, and I so appreciate you identifying that. It's brilliant research. And you're right, the studies have been shown over and over again that you can be in an organization that has a wonderful culture, but the direct supervisor, your first line supervisor, has the greatest impact on whether or not you're going to feel fulfilled at the end of the day, in addition to whether or not they give you meaningful work or allow you to be in on things. Those are the top two that most research studies show. And when I look at what's how do you navigate that? And there are several, I would say, must-dos, if you will.
Yeah.
And one is, when you're so clear, being willing to speak that. So when I worked in the government, I had somebody who had a different philosophy of the job that I had. And the different philosophy was that, if the agency says do this, you do it. Like, that was his.
Yeah.
This is the bottom line. They tell you to do it, and you do it, and it's very simple, and you don't question it. And I was of a different mindset, and so for me, there was me pushing back, and the pushing back was in a way that was done with respect, and one that I would say, so I'm clear that I'm being told to do this, and here's where I'm having the issue. And it wasn't done in a place of wanting to create issues, but it was looking at, once again, getting into the, why do we always do something a certain way? Oftentimes because nobody's ever questioned whether or not there could potentially be another way. And from an ethical standpoint, there were also, not ethical, that's not the right. From a value standpoint, we had different values, not necessarily different ethos, different values. And so what I would do is I would say, so I had a shift, I had a very specific shift, and it might have been 8 to 4. And I would say, so I want to go to the gym in the morning, and so I like to come in and work. I'm going to work 1 to 9. And I remember early on, my boss was like, but your shift is 8 to 4. And I was like, I understand. And the office is a 24/7 facility. And I have employees that are here 24/7. And there's no reason why I can't see a different part of the shift. And we ended up being in conversation. And what was fascinating is that I said to him, the benefit is if you come in at 8, you get to see the people from 8 to 1. I said, I'm actually here later. I get to see different shift. We don't have to pay anybody overtime. And there's a whole other way of doing things. And I did it so that it would benefit me. And I also allowed it to be able to be where the organization benefited. So in the conversation, in that courageous conversation, it's always looking at, how does this benefit the organization? How does it benefit you? How do you get what you want? ultimately, I believe that that's leadership. And sometimes it's the managing, up, managing down, managing side to side that I'm sure you've dealt with many, many times. And yet it's not done from the standpoint of, well, this is what they want me to do. This is the only way to do it. And I've got to do it this way. And so different philosophies, different, but we both wanted the same end result. And that's the other part that I communicated, and that I believe that managers need to communicate, is that whether it's an employee or whether it's another leader and you're managing up, we still want the end result, don't we? Want the same one. Now, if you're with somebody who's a manager and they don't want the same result, then it might be where you're in a difficult situation and you're looking at, can I move someplace else? Or is it time to leave? And there's sometimes when I get coaching clients where it's time to leave because everything in them, the culture itself overall is the organization, but their immediate supervisor and the supervisor above them is tolerating behavior that's unacceptable and isn't in alignment with who they are and what they're called to do. And to stay there longer and expect people to sort of get it or believe that you've got to tolerate it, I look at is you're wasting precious moments and minutes of your life by doing that. This is not I don't know how to get along with people. This is sometimes you're just in places where behavior is tolerated that just shouldn't be. And the longer you stay there hoping for a different outcome, the sicker you can make yourself.
And it's also that we're expending energy, and our energy should be so precious for ourselves that... But just going back to the conversation, most people would just do what they're told. Most people, if their boss said, do this, they're just going to say, oh, well, I'm just doing my job. But by the same token, it's sucking the life out of you. And that subservient style nature is not leadership. Now, during our conversation, we've talked about courage so much. And one of the biggest things that always pops up in my mind when we're talking about courage of leadership is when there is a general meeting. You might have 20 odd people in the room and no one speaks, or the leader speaks and everyone listens. And then what we often see is this meeting after the meeting where all of a sudden all the whispers and the rumours and the innuendo and the challenges and the reasons and the excuses are already being formulated as to why things aren't going to happen as the leader just mapped out. So from a leadership perspective, courage is really important. What are some of the strategies or tips that you can provide for a leader that's wanting that courage but also wants to be safe, I guess, or that self-preservation instinct?
I think that's a great question for the individual's, the individual's safety, and to acknowledge that that's a real thing. People want to ensure that they're not going to be thrown under the bus. And at the same time, that's one of the definitions of courage, right? You're faced in a situation that's of danger. That's what courage really is. You're in a dangerous situation and you still put yourself out there. And so one of the things that I would do and that I advise clients to do is listen. To be in the meeting and listen and take in as much information as you possibly can. And before the meeting comes to an end, I don't care whether it's 10 minutes before or 5, understand that there's a time when you've given yourself permission and you've gotten as much information as you can, and you're going to pose a question, at least one, perhaps two, and maybe three. And you're simply going to be the person who challenges things, not from the standpoint of, here's what it is I think we should do, but here's what it is that I've heard, and here's the question that it brings up for me. And be that person who then allows additional dialogue to happen, especially if you're seeing something and it's going sideways and you're going, I don't understand how we're being asked to do this. Is that, number one, it's less threatening to people because you're not coming out there. And number two, it really comes from a place of genuine curiosity because you care.
Yeah.
And number 3, it's honoring of other people who may have a perspective and don't have the courage to necessarily speak up, but now have the ability to answer your question or answer what it is that you're bringing into the room. And with regards to, the leader that wants to foster that and yet can't figure out why people are silent, it's often because they don't feel safe. And so to address that, I will say that early on in my career, I didn't have people who shared openly with me. I'm very direct. I'm very, I'm very much, to the point. And so understanding other people's styles, what I started to do in my performance evaluations and in conversations was I would ask 3 questions. So what do you feel that you're doing really well? What is it that you feel that needs a bit of improvement? Those would be like 1 about them. The second question would be about me. What do you feel I'm doing really well? And where do you feel I need improvement? That's a hard question to ask somebody who's a subordinate. And then the third question was about the team. Us collectively, our talents. What are we doing collectively well, and where could we improve? And when you look at it in that, you're giving people the opportunity. You then have to do something about that and be willing to do something different. I remember an employee saying to me, you come in and you always want to get right to work. And I'm like, yeah, that's what we're here for. That's what we get paid for, right? Like, I want to get right to work. And what they said was, it would be nice if you actually acknowledged us. And I went, what does that mean? Like, I remember being irritated at the time. Like, what are you talking about? And I just got operational styles that, because I'm hardwired, and if you want to do a DISC assessment, in that sort of high D box, for me, it's about the operational effectiveness and let's get to the work. But for somebody who's wired differently, they didn't necessarily feel seen and valued and heard. And that's far more important to productivity if we look at long term, and that. And so to be able to be that kind of leader, that takes courage as well, to be vulnerable and open and foster the authenticity that you would want. One of my favorite stories is the road to Abilene. How do you get to a place where you have a group of people who sit together and go, yeah, we should do that. Yeah, we should do that. Yeah, we should do that. Because nobody wants to be the guy that goes, no, that's not such a good idea. And then, you get there and it's like, no one's happy. And so if you don't want that kind of environment at work, then you yourself are responsible for cultivating that and creating that. And that's going to involve you being vulnerable yourself. And I had to learn that the hard way through mistakes and getting it wrong. It certainly has benefited my coaching clients.
And that's absolutely true. I work with a number of people that would be in that high D area, and it's really interesting working with them. And it's in a coaching relationship, they actually get quite vulnerable because they do have that feeling that they're misunderstood by people, and it's quite a challenge. But often I'll talk to leaders about the concept of coaching courage, and what I mean by coaching courage, because most people think it's about taking risks and being bold. To me, coaching courage in my team is one of my biggest responsibilities. So I need them to be courageous to tell me the stuff as a leader that I need to hear, so that I can understand that concept of what's it like to be led by me. So if I can't coach that courage by within my team, I'm not going to hear that stuff, and I'm going to have silent meetings, and I'm going to get lip service when I ask for some feedback. I'm going to be told what I want, what they think I want to hear, as opposed to some genuine feedback that's going to help me progress as a leader. And once again, that's incredibly hard for a lot of leaders to take on board, that they want that feedback from their team. Most of the time they try to put up this facade that they're infallible and that they're perfect, and their teams know better because they know all their mistakes their leaders are making. So you may as well admit to it and be vulnerable and try and seek ways to improve it. So
absolutely. And no one wants to give give feedback or share those if it's not safe, and then they're going to be harmed in the process. So, absolutely. And I will tell you, I was one of those leaders in the beginning where I'd be like, I'd be in the closet, like calling one of my colleagues going like, how do I do this? Versus just asking my team and going, I don't know how to do this. Like, like who here knows how to do this and can help me out? And so, that's that difference between the answers and the, and the questions. And today I'm so grateful for the ability to just pick up the phone. I don't sit at my computer and go, how do I do this in my business? I go, who knows how to do this? Because I don't.
And your journey shares so many times that you've learnt stuff along the way from mistakes that you've made, and that there's a whole story in itself for so many leaders out there, because there's a really big difference about growing through failure, I guess, or making mistakes than continuing to make the same mistakes. So, leaders, there's a real opportunity to take that on board. So, Lisa Marie, as we mentioned, you are noted as the inspiration behind Anne-Marie Schroeder's journey. So, who's inspired you in your leadership journey?
So, if I have the ticker tape, like my, my like, oh, and the, and all of the long list of people who've inspired me. And I've been asked this question so many times, Coach Curl, and my mom was a single mom. And I watched her trade pieces of her dream for the feeling that she had to put food on the table and there was no option.
Yeah.
And that inspires me. I don't know that I've ever said it on a show or to anybody before, but that's a big part of my reason for not wanting another leader to have to live that kind of existence.
Yeah.
So she was a huge inspiration for me.
Yeah. And such a beautiful way that you just put that, Lisa Marie, trading parts of her dream. And, and in so many ways, shapes and forms, there's people doing that every single day that they're existing. And that, or that they've got such a different idea about what a dream is, and we just tell ourselves, oh, it's just a dream. Whereas, in so many ways, there are still so many things that we should be reaching out and thriving or striving to achieve, and not just settle with what it is that we've got sitting there right now. So,
well, I say that if every single person actually did whatever they're called to do, if every person really went out and did it, gosh, I mean, I think the world would be unrecognizable. I just think, it would be amazing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Your journey is highlighted many. You've had your peaks, you've had your troughs. So, how would you describe your relationship with failure?
Oh, I'm friends with it. I'm friends with it. I've made friends with failure. It's been what's given me beautiful experience.
Yeah. Once again, a really nice way to put it. So many people are fearful of failure or don't even try because of that fear of failure, and you're a friend with it, and it's given you beautiful experiences. So
we've traveled well together, Coach Curl.
And it's interesting how we look at it, because one of the people that we've interviewed on the podcast, Max Story, highlighted the fact that as we watch a baby learn to walk, we talk about learning to walk. We don't talk about they're failing to walk. And it's like what we do each and every day. Every day we're going to try something that doesn't work, and we're going to learn from that. So, potentially we look at it as a failure and we stop ourselves. So I like that. You're friends with failure. That's beautiful. So what, out of everything that you've accomplished, Anne-Marie, what are you most proud of? Sorry, Lisa Marie.
We're the same. What am I most proud of? I'm most proud of, it's interesting, there's several things, but I can feel it move me to tears. I'm most proud of remaining true to who I am.
Yeah.
To what matters most to me, and to not sacrifice the things that are most important for things that are ultimately less important because somebody else said that I should value them. Like I'm really, like I said, it moves me to tears. It's there are times in my business where I look at what somebody else is doing in their business or somebody else is doing in their coaching consortium, and I can easily go, well, I should do that. Well, like it's like you. I should have set up a podcast. I should have done this. I should be, and the answer is, I've created something pretty incredible for me.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of that, because there have been many times where I could have gotten distracted or sidelined and ended up living someone else's life.
Yeah, and no one wants that. That's for sure. So the vision for you moving forward?
Vision for me moving forward, I just purchased a 75-acre farm with an event center, and so the vision.
Oh, wow!
Yeah, so the vision for me moving forward is to have leaders have a place for them to come and do their work one-on-one or in retreats with me. I've been doing retreats and one-on-one work for about 17 years. However, this is a place for them to experience the land and take the walks and do their own, I call it healing work. That may sound for some people to be kind of woo-woo. However, I believe that we all have our own elements where the world has told us that what we do isn't good enough or isn't wise enough. And I see every leader as wanting the exact same thing, to be valued and appreciated and honored and respected and loved for who they are, not for what they do, but for who they are as a person. And so for all of the times they didn't get that, I want my center to be a place that gives them an opportunity to do that in the quiet. And so this is a big part of my journey right now. I have no idea how it's going to unfold. This has all been kind of given to me, and it wasn't this mapped out strategic plan. It was really, just God saying, you should buy this place, and me going, really? Who? Me? So.
It's and hopefully when the travel bubbles start to sort of open up for us here in Australia, one of the greatest things I love doing is getting over to the States, and my wife and I run marathons. So I think we're down to do the Chicago Marathon, maybe not next year, the year after. So I'll have to, hopefully you've made some progress on that. And I'll,
yes, and that's actually really close to me. I mean, that's really super close to me. So I'll get to come out to the marathon and see you in Chicago, and then you'll get to come and recover at our place.
Yeah,
so.
That sounds good to me. Sounds perfect. So, Lisa Marie, how can people connect with you?
They can find me on my website, which is upsidethinking.com, UPSIDE, and the word thinking, THINKING.com. And a great place to find me is also on LinkedIn. So awesome. Lisa Marie, it's been an absolute pleasure having you join us today on the Today's Leader podcast. Thank you so much for your investment in leaders, especially today's leaders. Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Coach Kroll. Appreciate it.